I'm a fertility specialist, and we see so many people suffering from infertility. The emotional challenge of being infertile is another one that I think is so hard. Depression,
Oh, yeah.
and I've seen suicide in this practice also, which is so
Mm.
sad and hard. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background, how you why psychiatry, and then how you sort of fell into the nutritional aspect of healthcare and psychiatry.
Oh my goodness. Why psychiatry? I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. um, I I love a challenge. I love, mysteries and getting to the bottom of things and solving problems. And I also love people, and I love science. And so when I'll tell you a story, which is when I was in medical school, I had to take a year off right towards the end because I could not, for a lot of reasons. I needed a break, first of all, which was just good for me to take a break after all that work. But I could not decide what kind of residency to do. And the two things I was stuck between, this could be a whole therapy session, was psychiatry and pathology. And so, psychiatry is, considered one of the softer medical professions. It's not so
Yeah.
hard science. And pathology is just, you barely talk to anybody. You're in a lab with a microscope, you're doing autopsies, looking at tissue samples. And so this gives you maybe a little insight into the strangeness of my brain, which is, I love people, but I love concrete evidence and science. And the truth is that, when I was going through my rotations, I just kind of fell in love with it. I mean, I found the stories so fascinating. I found people so compelling. And I just really, I think my mom has this in her too. Like, I love working with people. And so I'm trying to understand where they're coming from. So, but then, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a psychiatry resident. I'm going to be a psychiatrist. I'm going to learn all about the brain and
Yeah.
how emotions work. And, I was going to learn all the mysteries of the mind. I did not. I mean, it was really actually frustrating to go through 4 years of residency and learn almost nothing about the brain or how anything really worked. We learned a lot about medications. We learned about psychotherapy, and I really value and still use psychotherapy skills every day. I got very good training in psychotherapy, but I didn't learn anything about how the brain worked or why it stopped working properly. And
Right.
so that was frustrating because then when you practice, you don't know how to answer people's questions about why things aren't going right. And you honestly don't really know how to help them except through trial and error approaches because you don't have anything to go by. So that was really kind of an eye opener.
The why part of it, it's interesting because I didn't like psychiatry in medical school because it wasn't concrete. I was a math, science, concrete. I'm a surgeon. That's why I went into OBGYN because I work with my hands, I fix things, and it seemed more concrete. But the why part of disease and the brain is another organ system, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver. I mean, we kind of, there's this mysteriousness of the brain, the understanding of why and what's going on, the pathology. And you said the answer is we don't know.
Well, I was taught the model that I was taught was called the biopsychosocial model. So
Mhm.
of the underlying what causes mental illness, what causes mental health problems. There are these biological factors, which are these sort of maybe it runs in your family, maybe you have some weak genes in your family, and maybe you're going to develop some neurotransmitter imbalances, chemical imbalances under stress, or just at a certain age because that's what's going to happen to you. So mysterious chemical imbalances we still to this day cannot test for in the office. And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
the psychosocial pieces, things like stress and trauma, and your mother, those kinds of things. I was taught to address with psychotherapy. So I had medications and psychotherapy, and that's what most psychiatrists use, right? But the wonderful thing, and the reason why we are here talking together today, and it is because I wrote this book, and I wrote this book because things are changing in psychiatry. There's a paradigm shift going on, right? So what's happening right now, after decades of standing still, the biology of psychiatry is taking a quantum leap forward. And we now understand so much more about what causes mental health problems than we did even 10 years ago. And they're the same players that are, affecting the rest of our health, thank goodness, because it's actually not that difficult to sort out, right? And you know these very well. Inflammation,
Yep.
oxidative stress, which is why we're told to eat all these antioxidants. Not true, but that's
whatever that is.
whatever those are.
Yes.
Not true, but that's what we're told. And then in insulin resistance. So these three players they really loom large in most psychiatric conditions, and that's really good news because we know lots about how to deal with all of those.
And so I first met you, I mean, it seems like 5 years ago, but I think it was a lot longer than that, through dietdoctor.com, a lot of Keto World, Paleo World, and nutrition, which was something that I didn't learn anything about. And I kind of tripped over it because my patients were getting pregnant on a paleo diet. And I'm like, what is that? And that's a little bit how I came to find out about yourself, and inspired for many years about your knowledge about health and wellness and nutrition. How did you sort of come to this crossroads about where nutrition fell into this idea of mental health?
It was through my own selfish journey. I was running into some health problems in my early 40s that were kind of baffling to me, and the doctors that I saw, and I had all these tests, and it was the same thing that so many of my patients were talking to me about, that I had no idea to help them with these things either. So these were things like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and IBS and migraines and all these kind of mystery syndromes, and that I didn't understand, and didn't know what to do about. But because one of the symptoms was stomach pain after I ate, I thought, well, okay, they did all these tests and everything was normal. I thought, well, at least that issue must be food related. So I'll just start experimenting with my diet to see, okay, what's hurting my stomach, and can I take whatever that is out? And it really did start as simple as that. And then it turned into this 6-month experiment, trial and error, food, and because there were clear relationships between what I was eating and what was happening to me. So 6 months later, trial and error, taking things out, and documenting everything. And what I ended up with, as I know this happens to you as well, is a diet that's almost completely upside down and backwards from what we're told to eat. And that was the diet that resolved every single one of those physical issues. And I wasn't even expecting it to. And then on top of that, and this is where the psychiatry comes in, I didn't think of myself as having any significant mental health issues, kind of garden variety things, depression in the winter time, anxiety on Sunday nights, kind of spent at the end of the day by 5 o'clock, kind of useless, easily overwhelmed, those kinds of things. I thought these are normal things. Everybody has these. They all went away. My concentration was better. My energy was better. My mood was better. My sleep was better. My mental stamina, my productivity, it was just amazing. And I thought, this diet seems to be good for the brain. So, I'm a psychiatrist. I have a lot of people. My practice is filling up with people who aren't getting better. I wonder if food could help them. But this diet that I've arrived at, based on the little bit that I knew about nutrition at the time, I honestly thought it was a dangerous diet. I thought it was going to kill me ultimately. Meat and fat and cholesterol, low fiber, and low. It was a very low plant, low carbohydrate, low fiber, high fat, high cholesterol, high animal protein diet. All the things you're not supposed to do. But that was the miracle in my life. And so I began to study nutrition. I said, I can't recommend this to my patients. I can't use this in my work unless I understand what's going on here. So then my whole pathology brain kicked in. I was like, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to understand this. And I just read for years, like several years, every article I get my hand on. And as you know, scratch the surface of any sort of conventional kind of mainstream nutrition science article, there's no science there. And so everything we've been told, almost everything we've been told, is based on, it's like a house of cards. There's really nothing to support it.
Do you think our cultures and our evolution of our diets in our social cultural environments has been the drivers of what we eat? And for some reason, we're making up a story of what is healthy. I was just talking to a patient, and they used the word clean or organic and healthy. And a little bit, where does all that come from? Why do we think these things?
Yeah, boy, such a good question. And I don't have a great answer for you, but I did wrestle with this in the book, because, I have a whole chapter about meat and, meat being good for you, and saying in the book that, I wish that was all I needed to say, because that's really all you need to know. But I had to dedicate a whole chapter to this because everything you hear about meat is exactly the opposite. So I just sort of go through and walk people through why you hear this and that and the other thing, and what that's actually based on. So part of what I also tried to wrestle with in the book was the spiritual and emotional and social feelings, all of these factors that come into play about how we view meat versus eating animals versus eating plants. And when I looked into it a little bit, I'm not an expert in this. Belinda Fetke is actually an expert in this. But the roots of anti-meat sentiment and being unclean and being unladylike and all of those things, to eat meat, a lot of that is rooted in ancient religious traditions, and which is in certain cultures that it was common to eat a vegetarian diet, even going back a very, very long way. Not vegan. That's a relatively new development, but vegetarian. And so I think part of it, and one of the ideas I toss out in the book is that helps me, I think that this might have something to do with it, is identifying with animals because we have a conscience, right? So other animals just walk up to other animals and swallow them whole. They don't even think twice about it, right? They're not like wrestling. Oh, I don't know. Is it going to hurt? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to be painful for the other animal? Is this cruel? Animals don't have to wrestle with things because they don't have a conscience. We have a conscience, and we have empathy, and we, especially for other mammals, they're the closest to us. So we can relate to them. We can look them in the eyes. We can have relationships with them in certain ways. And so I think that's a big part of it too. But then another piece of it is this idea, that animals are safe and innocent and welcoming, and all of these sort of, you can almost cue the flute solo, right? You can hear the flute solo in the background, the innocent plant in nature, and how could it possibly wish you any harm? Whereas an animal, if you, it's unclean. It's made of, saturated fat and red meat and cholesterol, which, by the way, we are too. And so, it's complicated. And then layer on top of that, somehow these religious ideologies started to intermix with nutrition science. So nutrition scientists and nutrition authorities started to pay a lot of attention to these anti-meat sentiments, and they started actually believing them and then looking for evidence to support them. So then you start to see, especially the past 75 years or so, lots of scientists trying to figure out why plants are so good for you and why meat is so bad for you. And all of their studies turn up empty-handed, but it doesn't stop there. Keep looking for evidence for this upside down way of looking at the world.
You spent a lot of time in research and writing and talking and speaking eloquently about the science and the research. What is our problem as physicians and scientists and researchers that I always talk, even in my science of fertility, we we argue back and forth for years over the science of something. One year we're right here, and then it's to the left, and then it's back to the right. What's going on with the science, and how is it that we as scientists report in the journals and then the public picks it up, that there's this disconnect and none of us can quite figure it out?
Well, as you know, there's science and there's science, right? So what is science? And I talk about this in the book too. What is science? Science is, lots of different ways you could describe it, but everyone, I think, would agree that it has to have at least these two components. You have to have, an idea, a hypothesis, a theory about what you think what you think is going on in the world, right? So you observe something. Mm-hmm. You observe something around you, say, oh, I wonder why that is. And say, hey, maybe it's because of this, So you see an apple fall out of a tree. Oh, maybe it's because, a squirrel pushed it out of the tree, or maybe there's something called gravity. You have these ideas, right? That's wonderful. Make an idea, make all the ideas you want. But then you have to test your ideas in an experiment. And if you don't do that, you can have the wrong idea, belief about something for the rest of your life because you never have to put it to the test. This is the type of science that most nutrition headlines and guidelines are based on. So it's called nutrition epidemiology. Mm-hmm. These are, as you know, these are questionnaire-based guesses about what foods are causing what diseases, right? So the problem with nutrition epidemiology, all of the many, many, many papers that are published every day that come out of the field of nutrition epidemiology, nutrition epidemiologists, they stop at step one. They never go to step two. They never test their theories. They are publishing guesses day after day after day as if they're facts. And we just eat them up because they sound so appealing. It's like, oh, all I have to do is eat another extra half cup of blueberries every week and I will be able to stave off dementia. Well, sign me up. That sounds fantastic. Chocolate? Excellent. I would love to add more chocolate to my diet. Red wine? Bring it on. I've always wanted an excuse to drink more red wine. It's ridiculous.
What is holding us back in doing the proper studies, the research, to answer these questions more appropriately?
Part of it is money. Doing a really good clinical trial with enough people, designed carefully, and that's long enough to really make a difference, costs a lot of money. So who's going to pay for that if there's no drug involved or no agenda involved, right? But then the other part is just studying nutrition is really hard. Yeah. It's just complicated. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of ingredients in our modern foods. How do you even begin to, study that in any meaningful way without locking people up in a metabolic ward and measuring and weighing and documenting every single thing they're eating? Because if you don't do that, you have no idea what they're actually eating.
Are we biased as human beings, as doctors, researchers, physicians, and there's some bias? I'm Italian, grew up Mediterranean diet. My grandmother lived 104. She smoked Pall Malls, drank Manhattans, Mediterranean diet, and wonderful woman. And so, what is are we biased? And even when the science is obviously opposite, do our biases somehow change the outcomes?
Yeah, we're human, right? So we're not robots. We're not, oh my gosh, we're not like Spock. We have feelings and we care about things and we have agendas and we have histories and we have culture and religion and politics. We have strong feelings about food, and it's impossible. I would be fooling myself if I thought that I didn't have any biases. I do my best to be aware of them. I do my best to disclose them, but I'm sure even I am missing, I'm not immune to this either. But, I think that all of us just have to be honest with ourselves about the fact that we do have biases because we're people. And that's natural, but just, okay, have your biases, share them to the extent that you're aware of them, be honest and open about what you're doing, And but still test your theory so that you can find out whether or not you're right or wrong. Don't you want to know if you're right or wrong?
Sometimes I don't.
Well, okay, that's a human thing too.
Right.
I think that's a really great point. Actually, I think people actually don't want to admit if they're wrong. They don't want to know.
What is it? Half of what we learned in medical school is wrong, but we just don't know which half.
Right.
Right.